Hey guys, this is Mosquito, also known as Chris, with themodzoo.com, and today I've got a little bit of an unboxing and sort of an overview of the Streacom FC5 Alpha. So let's go give this thing the once over and see what we think. Alright, so this is kind of a bit of a different unboxing here. We haven't really done anything like this yet at themodzoo.com. This is a Streacom FC5 Alpha. This one is in silver. It also comes in black. This one does not have the optional bay for an optical drive. That is an option on this model, but this one does not include it. So, what's so different about this chassis? Well, you can kind of see there's a bunch of holes in it from the outside heat sinks, but there's no fan holes. Does Streacom not believe in fans? Well, not with this chassis, I guess. This is one of their fanless chassis, and what it is a case that actually has heat pipes and a heat sink that you attach straight to your processor and motherboard, and then you can use the entire case as your heat sink. So this is all aluminum, and it's got a nice finish to it. I kind of like the finish. It's a little bit matte finish. It's definitely not glossy, and as you can kind of hear when I wipe my hand across it, it's not terribly smooth. It's kind of got a light texture to it. It feels pretty good though. I mean, it feels like it's decent quality, and I don't think there should be any issues with that. It certainly looks nice. So let me grab a screwdriver and get to opening this thing up. So there are no thumb screws on this case, but that's okay because I don't know how often you would actually be changing things out of this once you get it set. It's not like you're going to be upgrading your graphics card every week or two, because you're pretty limited in what you're going to be able to use if you wanted to have an external graphics card anyway. So there's two little screws on both sides, and they are located up here and then up here in between some of these fins, and that is how you get the top panel off once you get all four of those taken out. There we go. Slide that back, take it right off. Here you can kind of see the brackets that they use. They're just kind of these little brackets here that you put the screws right into from the outside of the case. So with that out of the way, you can see a little bit more of the internals of this case. We have a bunch of perforations in the bottom, and presumably those are going to help with your airflow, you know. Well, convection more so than airflow, I guess. It's not really airflow because we're not forcing any of it, but you have a little bit of air movement just through the natural heat rising and just being able to have a little bit of fresh air into the case. You can see that there's two wires here, one for the power switch and one for the LED, and that goes up to this front little hook up here. And then on the outside you can see we have our button and the little spot for the LED. And then over on the other side we have a spot for an IR remote, which I did not get with this one. That's an optional accessory, but there's mounting for that. That just goes right here, and that allows you to use an IR remote, and I believe the function that they have is for also allowing you to turn on your computer. So you would plug your power switch into the IR sensor, and then the IR sensor would plug into your motherboard, so you could use a remote to power your computer on from an actual off state, not just wake it up from sleep. And then you can also see they have a USB 3.0 header, and that splits. There's one on one side and the other one goes to the other side. So you have a pair of USB 3.0 ports hidden between these two fins here on either side. And I don't know, I'm not sure how I feel about that. We'll see, because if you have certain devices it'll work, but presumably if you have a thicker device it won't. Here's an example. I have flash drive. Oops, put it in the right way. Typical flash drive, and you've got an alright amount of space. I mean, it gets tight. You're not going to have it a whole lot bigger, but I have, say, this wireless adapter. A little bit bigger. Yep. Nope. That's not going to fit. I'm going to have to get an extension for that. So that's kind of a bummer, but I guess you could kind of say, you know, if you have something more on this range of size, you know, then you just put it in the back of the case. But I guess that's something you'll have to know, is that nothing wide is going to fit in these side USB ports. So going back to the inside of the case, they have some pre-installed standoffs here. Looks like they have 4 of them for ITX, but there are also mounting points. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So yeah, we have all of our regular standard mounting points for an ATX board. This case does support up to an ATX board. Obviously that's going to take up some of the space that you have otherwise. And as you can see back here, we have some perforations and 1 slot for a PCI device if you have, like I said, an adapter. On the back of the case, you have a square opening, and that's for mounting either a plug adapter for their, they have a kind of a, almost a Flex ATX or Flex ITX or whatever it is. Not an SFX, but it's smaller than SFX. But they have a little power supply that mounts in here that you can optionally buy from them. Otherwise, if you have a Pico power supply or their equivalent of a Pico power supply, you can use the hole in this bracket to mount where that barrel connector goes. So that's what that's for. And it looks like we also have a little Kensington lock here if you wanted to lock it down. And it is nice that it looks like everything is held together with screws. So presumably you could take the front panel off because there's 2 screws here, and then we've got 2 more screws for that side, and then you can see that we have a screw hidden under here and another one in that corner, and that's for the feet, which we'll look at in a second. And then we can take off the back panel with a couple of screws on the back, and then on the bottom there's a couple more screws across the back here and then across the sides, so we can take the back piece and all the side pieces off all in one go. So that's kind of cool. And then you can also take off these feet, presumably with the 4 screws that are on the inside. So on the outside, on the bottom, it's pretty plain, not a whole lot, just some perforations and then some spots for screws. And these are countersunk, and without getting too far into it yet, those are all the locations where you can mount drives, whether it's hard drives or solid state drives. So next, let's take a quick look at the manual and go through some stuff there. Alright, so looking at the manual, you know, you have all your specs of the case with the layout. You can see this is where the optional optical drive bay would go on the inside of the case, and that's something that I don't have on this one, obviously. And now they kind of get into, you know, all your instructions for installing all your hardware, standoffs, how to install your motherboard. You can kind of see that right here is how that processor will go, or the processor heatsink rather, will go onto your processors. This is how you assemble it. So you put some thermal paste in those 4 tracks, you put in all of the heat pipes, you put in the other heat pipes with some thermal paste in those 3 brackets. All the necessary hardware is included in that package of stuff to put all this together, and then that goes right onto your processor. So that's how you cool the CPU. is you put that whole assembly onto the case, and then the whole side then becomes your heatsink, which is kind of cool. They do say that you are limited to 65 watts is the recommended max. I don't know if it goes into detail in the manual yet. I haven't looked through it yet, but I was reading on their website that so they recommend 65 watts or less. You can get away with, I think it's up to 74 watts or 84 watts. There's specifications, and I'll put that in the actual description of what it'll actually handle, but that's under ideal circumstances. So if you have this out in the open somewhere where there's decent air movement, then you'd be okay to get up to that max TDP, but otherwise they recommend not going higher than, I think it's 65 watts. So I mean, that's not bad. You're not going to be gaming on this anyway, at least no hardcore gaming, because there's nowhere to put a dedicated graphics card of any real, any real high-end graphics card, so that's not really something I would worry too much about, because it's probably just going to be an HTPC anyway. So if we look at this, you can see that you can fit up to 6 2.5-inch drives. Up to 6. Or up to 7 if you have the optical drive bay version, because you can also mount one in that. And we can also mount up to 3.5-inch drives. And it's only 3 because these two are offset, because otherwise you won't be able to fit an ITX board in here if you have those so they don't overlap. So this is why you can only have 3.5-inch drives, is because these two holes are offset. But yeah, these are some interesting little cases that Streacom has come up with. So I really look forward to getting into the review and actually seeing what this thing is made of. Alright guys, so that was the quick overview and unboxing. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and we will get the review out as soon as we can. And until next time, thanks for watching, and be sure to subscribe for more. Catch you later.